Since the dawn of humanity, we have exchanged meat for stone, shelter for security, silence for protection. Today, we call it capitalism. But what if deep down, it's just the modern name for something we've always been? Long before any economic system, before banks, stock exchanges, or corporations, there were just people, and the need to survive. Imagine a group of prehistoric humans, hunters and gatherers constantly on the move. One of them has more meat than he can eat. Another has flint, a valuable stone for making weapons and tools. None of them has a coin, a bank, or a signed contract. And yet they trade. They trade because they need to. They trade because they know that living in a group requires cooperation. They trade because the instinct to trade is older than writing itself. This ancient scene is not an exception in human history. It is the rule. Since the dawn of time, exchange has been the invisible thread that has woven the survival of communities. There were no centralized governments or formal economies. There was need, trust, desire, and reciprocity. Everything that today we call the market was already present. Primitively, yes, but alive. Exchanges were more than economic. They were social bonds. Exchanging a piece of game for help with the night watch was also exchanging protection for peace of mind. Exchanging something material for something emotional. And that, deep down, we still do today. Contrary to what many people believe, the logic of the market was not born in the domes of power or in the corridors of modern capitalism. It was born in the campfire, in the field, in the cave. In the simplest, truest human relationships. Exchange is as natural a behavior as language. You give something and expect something in return. Not out of selfishness, but out of balance. Not out of cold calculation, but out of evolutionary intuition. That's why, even before the term capitalism appeared, we were already living the spirit of it. Instinctive, decentralized, organic. So what has changed? The scales, instruments, and names changed. What used to be barter became currency. What used to be an exchange between two people has become global networks. But the essence is still there. The search for something that is missing. The offering of something that is left over. The silent pact that everyone wins, although not always to the same extent. Capitalism, in this sense, can be seen not as an evil invention of modern elites, but as the formalization of a universal human impulse. To exchange in order to live. As human societies grew, direct exchange began to show its limits. Those who had fish didn't always want salt. Those who had wood didn't always need pottery. And so a dilemma arose. How to value things when the need is not reciprocal? The answer emerged little by little, in rudimentary markets, fairs, and meetings between villages. It was necessary to create something that everyone wanted. Something that would serve as a universal mediator. Thus was born the notion of symbolic value, and with it, the embryo of what we now call capital. Before money, there were objects of collective desire, shells, rare stones, shiny metals. They didn't feed, they didn't warm, but they carried a meaning. They were valuable because everyone agreed that they were. This abstraction revolutionized the way exchanges were made. For the first time, value could be stored, accumulated, transported, and even invested. More than a means of exchange, an instrument of the future was born. With it also came a new dimension of human existence, the possibility of planning, saving, and growing. What is often overlooked is that this movement was not imposed from above. It wasn't a state decision, nor was it the creation of a dominant group. It was an implicit agreement between ordinary people, a silent pact that said, I accept this as a symbol of something that counts. And so capital ceased to be just material and became psychological as well. It became a kind of concentrated trust. A metal or paper only has power because we believe in it. And this collective belief is one of the most powerful inventions in history. Capital, in this sense, is a social energy. It represents accumulated effort, time transformed into possibility. When someone buys something, they're not just transferring goods, they're transferring hours of life, of work, of intelligence. This profound abstraction is what makes capitalism possible. It organizes this energy. It channels it. it moves it around. And when it works well, it redistributes it in the form of innovation, comfort, mobility, and access. But when it fails, it concentrates too much, blocks flows, creates islands of privilege that contradict its own original logic. Of course, the system is imperfect. But its core is not exploitation. It's exchange. Its engine isn't inequality. It's trust. Capitalism only works because there is faith in contracts, banks, currencies, and promises. And this faith is fed by an invisible chain of daily validations: buying a loaf of bread, paying for a service, accepting a salary. All this is exchange. All this is recognized value. It's all capital in motion. So before we accuse capitalism of being unnatural or artificial, perhaps we should look at our own history. The invention of symbolic value is one of the most human of all, and the way we use it says more about us than about any system. If there is injustice, it doesn't arise from the idea of capital, but from the way we apply it. After all, the same fire that warms can also burn. The responsibility doesn't lie with the fire. It lies with who lights it and how they use it. Many accuse capitalism of being driven by selfishness, that it promotes greed, exploitation, and inequality. But this view overlooks an essential point. Capitalism depends on cooperation to function. It doesn't impose, it proposes. It doesn't force, it offers. It only happens when two parties agree to exchange, and there is only exchange if both believe that they are gaining something from it. If it were pure domination, there would be no market, there would be theft. If it were just imposition, there would be no contract, there would be coercion. Adam Smith already said, "The baker doesn't give us bread out of kindness, but out of interest." Even so, it is this interest that guarantees our food. In capitalism, individual interest connects with the needs of others. It is this network of interdependence that drives everything. No one thrives alone. Even the richest depend on the work of others. In the market system, personal success depends on collective acceptance. If you don't generate value for others, you disappear. This is the silent moral of capitalism. It doesn't demand kindness, but rewards those who offer real value. The more people you help, the more you grow. The more useful your idea, the more return it generates. This isn't idealism, it's logic. Capitalism doesn't need altruism to work, but it does create an environment in which helping others can be the best way to help yourself. This doesn't cancel out the problems, they exist. But the origin of these problems rarely lies in the logic of exchange, but rather in external distortions such as protected monopolies, corruption, or lack of social mobility. Even in everyday life, the morality of the system appears. You buy a coffee and activate a chain. The barista, the farmer, the distributor, the cup designer. Everything is connected. And what's most impressive? This happens between people who have never met. Trust is formed between strangers. The currency only has value because everyone, even if they don't know it, has agreed to it. It's an invisible pact that is renewed every day. To criticize capitalism for being imperfect is to forget that it mirrors precisely what we are. Imperfect, but creative. Flawed, but cooperative. Human. The system doesn't eliminate conflicts, it organizes them into exchanges. It is a stage for encounters, not a field of war. It's a place where individual desires can only be fulfilled if they make sense to someone other than yourself. There is a kind of capital that doesn't appear in statistics, nor can it be stored in vaults. It's not made of gold, real estate, or shares. This capital is invisible, but essential. Its name is trust. The entire architecture of capitalism rests on this silent element. Trust that the money I receive today will be worth something tomorrow. Trust that the contract will be fulfilled. Trust that the product I bought will work. Without it, there is no exchange. Without it, there is no economy. Without it, we return to barbarism. But trust doesn't come out of nowhere. It is built slowly, like a bridge. It requires reputation, stability, repetition. Above all, it takes time. Time is perhaps the most precious resource in human life, and curiously, it is also the basis of modern capital. When you invest in something, you are putting time into the future. When someone pays for a service, they are exchanging hours of their own existence for hours of someone else's existence. Every transaction is a conversion of time, desire, and promise. This is why capitalism is not just a system of material exchange. It is also a symbolic system where products carry stories, expectations, and projections. A brand is not just a name. It is an accumulation of trust over time. A professional doesn't just sell their strength, they sell their reliability, their ability to deliver what they promise. Even great fortunes are built on this invisible principle, the collective faith that what has been promised will be delivered. And what is most impressive, this faith is sustained without a central command, without a sovereign watching over every step. This decentralization is one of capitalism's greatest strengths. Unlike systems that rely on total control, the market is a living organism that adjusts as confidence moves. If a product fails, it loses value. If a company betrays the consumer, it disappears. Judgment is constant and silent. Thousands of choices made by ordinary people shape what thrives and what dies. It's a democracy disguised as an economic system, not with votes, but with exchanges. And yet, despite being underpinned by something as subtle as trust, capitalism has built bridges, hospitals, satellites, global networks, medicines, and innovations that shape the modern world. This didn't happen because someone forced millions of people to cooperate, but because they silently trusted each other through exchange. Every note, every click, every signature is a declaration of faith in the system, and, consequently, in each other. What many people don't realize is that the real collapse of capitalism would only happen if trust evaporated. It wouldn't be the stock market crashing or the banks going bust. It would be the end of belief, and that's why the system reinvents itself, adapts and molds itself to the times, because it needs to keep its true driving force alive. The hope that tomorrow it will still be worth trading. If capitalism is an expression of human nature to exchange, why does it generate so much inequality, frustration, and criticism? The answer lies less in its essence and more in its deviations. It's not exchange that corrupts, it's the manipulation of exchange. When market freedom is replaced by artificial privileges, protected monopolies, or institutional corruption, the system ceases to be a network of mutual value and becomes a vicious cog that benefits the few at the expense of the many. It's not the act of selling that destroys trust. It's the act of selling lies. It's not profit that degrades. It's profit built on deliberate exclusion. Capitalism, like any human construction, can be diverted, distorted, and perverted. When paths are blocked by bureaucracies that prevent the little guy from growing, or by mega corporations that manipulate rules in their favor, we are no longer talking about a free market. We're talking about a captured market, where the game is rigged even before the first move is made. The valid criticism of capitalism lies precisely here, in its recurring inability to protect itself against those who hijack it. There are moments when the freedom to exchange becomes the freedom to exploit, when efficiency becomes coldness, when innovation turns into planned addiction. But these symptoms are signs of disease, not the nature of the system, but the way it has been structured by interests that don't want fair exchange. They want domination. And the problem is that these deviations often wear the very clothes of capitalism, confusing those who look at it from the outside. That's why so many confuse the symptom with the cause. Criticism falls on the name capitalism, but rarely touches on the specific gears that have turned it into a caricature of itself. It's easier to shout against the system than to investigate the mechanisms that corrupt it. It's easier to demonize money than to study who artificially concentrates it. And so we miss the chance to reform what is possible, because we prefer to reject what is fundamental. The real challenge is not to destroy capitalism, but to purify it. Reducing unnecessary intermediaries, democratizing access to information, breaking down invisible barriers that prevent talent from flourishing. A healthy capitalism is one where everyone can play, where victory is the result of real value and not obscure connections, where exchange remains the link that unites, not the pretext for domination. History shows that attempts to replace capitalism with centralized, authoritarian, or supposedly fairer systems have often ended in tragedy. What was supposed to be liberation became control. What was supposed to be equality became surveillance. Capitalism, with all its flaws, is still the only system that allows an ordinary individual to turn a good idea into real impact. The key is to keep its foundations alive: freedom, trust, and responsibility. Because the problem was never trading. The problem was forgetting why we started trading in the first place. In the end, capitalism may not be about money, not about profits, not about markets, not about corporations. Maybe it's just the modern form of something much older, the impulse to exchange. And to exchange, in essence, is to recognize the other. It's admitting that I don't have everything on my own, that I need you to live, that even with all our faults, we are still capable of building a network of value where each person matters. When you exchange something, you're saying, I see what you have, I recognize your effort, and I believe that we can reach an agreement without violence, without imposition, without theft. That's why capitalism, with all its problems, remains an honest reflection of the human condition. It doesn't demand perfection. It demands presence. It demands awareness. It invites us to participate, to choose, to collaborate, even if we call it buying or selling. But at the same time, the system only continues to function if we remember what sustains it. And what sustains it is trust. It's the willingness to keep alive that invisible pact where time, value, and respect circulate between strangers. This pact, however, is not guaranteed. It needs to be nurtured, understood, corrected when necessary, and above all, it needs to be approached responsibly. If we want a world where exchange remains a bridge, and not a weapon, we need to cultivate this awareness. We need to remember that every choice carries a consequence, that every action, every support, every recognition is a part of something bigger. And that's why this video ends with a direct invitation, honest and coherent with everything that has been said so far. If this content has made sense to you, if it has somehow provoked a reflection or ignited a spark of understanding, consider giving something back. Here, the exchange also happens. You watch, I produce. And together, we keep alive this conversation which, unlike so many, is not based on noise, but on value. Like the video, subscribe to the channel, and, if you can, offer your support of any amount. Because this work also depends on trust. And as we've seen, trust is the most precious capital of all. Your help strengthens this work and allows more content like this to reach more people. And so we continue to exchange ideas, time, presence, and awareness. After all, perhaps this is what makes us truly human. The ability to offer something, not just for what we receive, but for what we want to build together.